Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's currently 9 o'clock. We'll start in about 2 minutes, give an opportunity for others to join us. Thank you. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the State Water Resources Control Board's Water Quality Fee Stakeholder Meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom and the webcast platforms, and also is being recorded. My name is David Ceccarelli, and I am the Fee and Revenue Branch Chief within the Division of Administrative Services. Today, we have many of the Fee and Revenue Branch staff working behind the scenes to ensure that this meeting runs as smoothly as possible. If any time throughout this event you find that you are having technical difficulties, please email us at feebranch@waterboards.ca.gov. Also joining me today from the Water Board's Fee and Revenue Branch and assisting me today with this presentation is Cassandra White. We also have multiple staff from the Division of Water Quality that also be joining us today. Individuals attending via Zoom, please use the raise the hand function if you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment. If you're joining us through the webcast, you can also submit a comment or ask a question by emailing the email feebranch@waterboards.ca.gov. In the past, there has been some delays in the broadcast through the webcast. Therefore, through the meeting, staff may pause so the broadcast can catch up to the listeners. Again, we thank you for joining us today virtually. We thank you for the patience as we moved into this 100% virtual meeting space. We're doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective manner. So let's just go over some meeting guidelines. Remember to use the handouts that were sent to you via email. If you don't have the handouts, don't worry. We'll be sharing the documents on the screen. You can also request a copy of the documents after the meeting, and the handouts are posted on the Water Board's fee webpage. Please introduce yourself and who you represent when it's your time to speak. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Remember, you can submit comments and questions throughout the event by sending them to the email. And we'll have staff monitoring the emails, and we'll take those questions as they come in. For the meeting to run efficiently and stay on track, we're requesting each participant who wants to ask a question to please ask one question at a time. I understand you may have a clarifying question to your original question, and that's accepted. Once your question is fully answered, we're going to move on to the next participant's question, and you'll be put back into the order of participants who are requesting to ask a question. In addition, we respect all opinions and input. However, if discussion starts to move away from the intent of the meeting, which is to discuss water quality fees, then I'm going to ask that the participant and I meet offline to coordinate these discussions further and involve the appropriate staff as needed. So at this time, let's review the agenda. And one update on the agenda, we're going to start with item 3, which is the waste discharge permit fund budget cost drivers. And then we'll take item 2 after that, which is the waste discharge permit fund condition statement. Through the cost drivers, we'll be discussing the different budget change proposals. Item number 4 is the waste discharge permit fund program budget detail. Then we'll go over potential fee changes. And then we'll move into an open discussion and then next steps, which is driving us to our board meeting on September 18th. And I also want to mention under open discussions, I'm going to have present as a document that's now on our fee webpage that goes over the water board's foundational programs. And so we'll highlight that under the open discussion item. Okay, so before we get into the actual agenda, I want to give an overview, or excuse me, not an overview, but more of a highlight of the board's the budget, and specifically budget letter 2410, which was sent to all state departments from the Department of Finance. And budget letter 2410 is posted on the Department of Finance's website. And so the 2024 Budget Act puts the state on a long-term, fiscally responsible path and promotes government efficiencies through approved ongoing budgetary reductions in fiscal year 24-25 and beyond. To achieve the savings included in the budget, the Department of Finance will work with agencies and departments over the coming months on these required budget reductions. To achieve a balanced budget, the budget assumes 2 separate budgetary reductions. So one, there will be a statewide vacant position funding reduction of $1.5 billion in fiscal year 24-25. And then in fiscal year 25-26, Finance will reduce another $1.5 billion and eliminate approximately 10,000 positions statewide via control section 4112. Now, keep in mind, this is throughout the state of California, all state departments. When I talk about numbers of like 1.5 billion, and then item number 2, as part of this ongoing budget letter, is there will be a 7.95 ongoing reduction to department state operation budgets in fiscal year 24-25. And this is via control section 4.05. So what does that really mean? Well, Finance will issue additional budget letters further detailing the processes and timing of these reductions. In the past, guidance in adjusting is provided in late fall, and this is after the board has adopted our fee schedules. Staff are setting the fees off the budgetary expenditures that are in the Budget Act, that are in the current Budget Act. At this point in the process, we don't know the total impact of these reductions since we have not received the guidance from the Department of Finance. Staff does anticipate these reductions will reduce our budgetary expenditures in our fee funds, and these adjustments will impact next year's fee setting cycle. So in general, when our budgetary expenditures are lower, it results in less revenue we need to collect. So I just wanted to highlight that we do anticipate that there are going to be reductions in all of our fee funds, including the waste discharge permit fund. It's just at this point, we don't know what those impacts are. And we're setting our fees off of the current Budget Act, and the budgetary expenditures are in the Budget Act. We don't have the timing of when the direction is going to be given to us. We do know that in the past that the guidance has been on adjustments has been provided in the late fall. which is, of course, after we set our fees in September. So we anticipate that, when these adjustments come out and we determine the impacts, that these impacts are going to reflect on next year's fee cycle. So our fee setting cycle for 25-26. And again, that budget letter is posted on Department of Finance's webpage, and it is budget letter 2410. So let's go ahead and move to the budget cost drivers, and I will hand this off to Cassandra.
Thank you, and good morning. So we'll start. The first table shows the fee setting budget for fiscal year 23-24, which was approximately $187.7 million, followed by the governor's enacted fee setting budget for fiscal year 24-25, which is $201.8 million, and a net difference of about $14.1 million, or 7.5%. And note that there have been no changes to the budget since the May revise. And the second table shows the primary cost drivers of that net difference shown above. So the first cost driver is state operation, which was $6.9 million, or 3.7%. And that's primarily employee compensation, salaries, healthcare, and retirement. The next item is pro rata, and there was a decrease of approximately $1.1 million, or 0.6%. And then the final cost driver categories were BCPs. So the first BCP is the Gualala River TMDL Stipulated Settlement Agreement BCP. The BCP cost is $1.7 million, or 0.9%. The second is the Information Security and Privacy Office Staffing BCP. The cost is $215,000, or 0.1%. The third BCP is the Resources Needs to Address Impacts on Project Permitting Resulting from Supreme Court Case Decision, also known as by the name SACIT. The BCP is $6.1 million, or 3.3%. And then the final BCP, this is the Pajaro River Flood Risk Management Project, AB 876. The BCP cost is $225,000, or 0.1%. And now I'll just go and give you a little more detail for each of the BCPs. Okay, so back to the first one, the Gualala River TMDL Stipulated Settlement Agreement. This BCP will support the North Coast Water Board's efforts to, 1, satisfy the terms of a stipulated settlement agreement, 2, comply with the Porter Cologne Water Quality Control Act, and 3, fulfill the agency's obligation under the Federal Clean Water Act to protect and restore Gualala River watershed from its sediment impairment. The funding of $1.7 million will provide 3 permanent positions and contract funding, $1 million over the next 5 years, then $706,000 annually from that point. The second BCP, the Information Security and Privacy Office Staffing. This will enhance the Information Security Office staffing capabilities and establish a new privacy office. The new PYs, 4 PYs, will provide staffing needs in the areas of privacy, technical security, and informational security compliance. The total BCP cost is $629,000, but it is divided over various funds, including Safe Drinking Water Account and Water Rights Fund. But the WDPF portion is $215,000. And again, that is for 4 PYs. The third BCP, so the resource needs to address impact on project permitting resulting from recent Supreme Court case decision, SACIT. So the requested resources would be used to conduct essential water quality permitting and enforcement work that has historically been conducted by the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, but will no longer be due to a 2023 U.S. Supreme Court decision that reduced federal jurisdiction over a number of water bodies. The funding of $6.1 million will fund 26 positions and one-time IT contract costs from the Water Quality Certification Program. And then also there will be ongoing contract costs of $35,000 per year. And then the final BCP is the Pajaro River Flood Risk Management Project from AB 876. And the resources will perform the necessary expedited project river and oversight of the Pajaro River Flood Management Project through AB 876's sunset, which is in the year of 2035. The funding is for $225,000, and that will fund 1 permanent PY. And I will hand it back to David.
All right. Thank you, Cassandra. So this leads us now back to item number 2 on the agenda. And before we get there, are there any questions on the cost drivers? And I see Bob Gore. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. This is Bob Gore representing the cities of Santa Cruz, Antioch, Fresno, Long Beach, Woodland, Modesto Irrigation, Kings River entities, Kern County Water. You get the idea. 2 questions on the SACIT BCP. I'll ask them both together. One, is it being implemented according to legislative direction that was signed into law by the governor? And then secondly, can we please, and I see you, Phil Crater, can we please have some metrics to start us off on value hunting based upon SACIT, as in, for example, it's supposed to help with stormwater permits. Well, okay, how many permits are granted? There are some other firm metrics of progress beyond the performance review report that could help permit holders judge how we can best work with you. So those 2 questions, thanks.
Hey, Bob, this is Phil Crater from DWQ. On your first question, you're asking if it's being implemented according to legislative direction. I'm not exactly following. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, there was some note from the legislative analyst that the budget sub adopted that said, wait, no, you can't hire all these people all at once. You've got to, I don't have the numbers. I apologize. You have to hire some of them in the first fiscal year and then get back to us and then hire the rest of them if circumstances warrant. That's what I was.
So the way that the budget was approved for the SACIT BCP was an approval for the first budget year. The second budget year was removed from the BCP altogether.
Okay.
So we are absolutely implementing according to that direction. We've received approval to fill, and we're doing that.
Okay.
So thanks. Yeah, good question. On the second question, as far as metrics, we have been using the performance report, and I think we've got a lot of good metrics to show for the work that we've done. Moving forward on this, there is this new effort that we're going to have to backstop some of the NPDES permits that we've used in the past with a state permit for waters that are no longer subject to federal jurisdiction and don't fall under NPDES. As we do that, I anticipate we're certainly going to report on how that's going. The stormwater permits that we've identified as being in play here are the construction and the industrial stormwater permit. So it's not a number of individual permits. It's 2 general permits that we want to develop to cover state waters.
Right.
Does that make sense, Bob?
It certainly does.
And we would be happy to report on that in the performance report, as well as obviously our performance report is a public process and we love input and want to make sure that we're tracking and reporting things that are useful to us and to our regulated parties and our stakeholders.
Thanks, Phil. I'll reach out to you. We can extend this offline if that's okay.
Certainly. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
You're welcome. And thanks, David and Cassandra.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Phil, for the responses.
Of course.
So let's move back to item 2, which is the fund condition. Right, there we go. One thing I'll start with and highlight is fiscal year 23-24. Again, we still have this highlighted as a forecast because our accounting office is still working on closing the books, which includes closing the books and providing the updated fund conditions for the waste discharge permit fund. But most of this data that we have is nearly 12 months of data for the whole entire fiscal year. Again, it's a forecast because we don't have some of the last minute adjustments that may take place. So looking at column I guess it's the third column over, which basically highlights fiscal year 23-24 forecast. Our adjusted beginning balance was 10.6 million. We're anticipating to generate 189.2 million in revenue, with our expenditures to be roughly 190.2 million, which shows a little bit a net loss of about $1 million. So there was a little structural deficit. Our expenditures were a little higher than our revenues, which basically leaves us with a program ending balance of about roughly 9.6 million, which is a fund reserve of about 5.1%. And so moving into, again, our fee setting budget for 24-25, we always highlight if we didn't do any fee changes, how that would impact the fund. Just kind of roughly looking at the numbers with a starting balance of 9.6 million, and with our total revenue being at this time 188.7 million, and expenditures roughly at 201.8 million based on the governor's enacted budget. That would put us in a loss of about $13.1 million. And of course, our ending balance would be in the negative of 3.4 million, or roughly 3.5 million. And so looking at our proposals and what that's going to generate in revenue, again, our beginning balance 24-25 is 9.6 million. With our staff's proposals, we're anticipating generating 202 million in revenue. Our total program expenditures are 201.8 million, which basically balances the structure with an ending balance of roughly 9.9 million, which is again a fund reserve of about 4.9%, and so roughly in that 5% ballpark. So that's an overview right now of where we stand with the waste discharge permit fund. Are there any questions at this time? Bob, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do, and thanks again. One footnote, 5, fines and penalties, revenue and expenditures cannot be accessed by the fee programs.
Correct.
What's the statute? Where does the money go, and what's the statutory citation?
So the statutes in the water code, it needs to be authorized by the legislator for us to use the money. And so when we look at expenditures there, some of the fines and revenue that has come in has already been authorized for certain expenditures. And as a result, we track those expenditures, and those expenditures hit the fines and penalty revenue. And so the reason that we break this out like on this is because when you go into Department of Finance's website and you look at the fund conditions for the different agencies or for the water board, and you look at the WDPF, you'll see all the revenue, well, all the revenues, the revenues are broken out by the fee revenue and the fines and penalties, but we show total expenditures, and total expenditures are the expenditures for the regulatory activities and also the fines and penalties expenditures.
Right.
So we break it out this way. And so it highlights that when you look at the total reserve and the total, again, the total revenue, total expenditures of this fund, that there are two different components, right? You have the side of the fees, which pay for the regulatory side of the house, and then you have the fines and penalty revenue that comes in, and it pays for the expenditures they're being authorized by the legislators. And Phil just jumped on. I know, Bob, you asked about like the Water Code Authority. I don't have the actual section, but we can, we definitely could pull that up for you.
Well, we'll follow up what I'm
Okay.
getting at obviously is downstream bad
I
water.
don't mind telling you now, Bob.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I can't really share my screen, but a good example is Water Code Section 13350. 13350.
Got it.
It's one of our administrative civil liability sections, and subdivision K specifies that all funds generated by the imposition of liabilities under that section. So that's every administrative civil liability that's issued under that section, which is a pretty significant number, shall be deposited into the waste discharge permit fund, shall be separately accounted for, and shall be expended by the state board upon appropriation to assist the regional boards and public agencies in cleaning up discharges of waste. So it tracks the language in the cleanup and abatement account. It's essentially for all of the purposes for which we can use funds that are in the cleanup and abatement account. But these funds are instead placed into the waste discharge permit fund and segregated for cleanup and abatement activities only.
Thanks.
And there are maybe 3 or 4 similar sections in the water code that direct a portion, not all, but a portion of our administrative civil liabilities into the waste discharge permit fund instead of the cleanup and abatement account, but for the same purposes as the cleanup and abatement account.
It's good to know they're not going astray. That was my ultimate point, and thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Phil. Let me pause here for a second, see if there are any questions, any email questions. Thank you. Let's move to item number 4 then on the agenda. So here's the waste discharge program budget detail. Basically this is highlighting where we're at with the all of our waste discharge permit programs. Item row B there is the fiscal year 24-25 fee setting budget. So there's the budget of the 201.8 million. There are all the programs budgets, including their direct, indirect, and the foundational programs. Here is our projected revenue for 24-25 under our current fee structures. Basically D shows the net difference between the two. So as we looked at our cost drivers, we need to generate 13.3 million in additional revenue to cover our budgetary expenditures in the waste discharge permit fund. And so when you add C and D, that generates the $201.8 million. And so here are the average program percent changes. And again, ranging from 1.5 to roughly 5.7, of course, with one outlier there of the water quality cert, the 401 cert program, which is a 41.1%. But again, that's being driven by the SACIT BCP. which is, roughly $7 million budget change proposal. So are any questions at this time on this? Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next item. And this has to do with, we have one proposed fee structure change this year, which has to do with water recycling requirements. And I'm going to hand this off to Laura McClellan from Division of Water Quality.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we underwent a process since March of this year to evaluate proposed recycled water fee options through a budget change proposal a couple of years ago to implement the water supply strategy. The Water Board was given authority to assess fees for the first time for the water recycling component of waste discharge requirements and National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, or NPDES permits. And so we have been working with interested parties over the last couple of months to identify permits that this might apply to and develop options for a proposed surcharge that would apply to WDRs and NPDES permits that have water recycling requirements in them, as well as a standalone fee for permits that are water recycling requirements alone. And so we went through many options. As you can see, this is option F. So several iterations and options that were up for consideration and got a lot of really valuable feedback and input from many folks on this call. So thank you. And so where we landed with this, the current proposal that is on the table is that there would be a flat surcharge for NPDES and WDR permits. This is just for facilities that are producing recycled water consistent with California Code of Regulations Title 22. So they have an approved Title 22 engineering report, and their permit includes those requirements. So for those facilities, if they are producing water for potable reuse, so groundwater recharge for potable reuse or reservoir water augmentation, there would be a surcharge on their WDR or NPDES permit of $16,000 annually. And otherwise, if there's a permit for non-potable recycled water use, there would be a surcharge of $2,800 annually on top of their NPDES or WDR fee. For permits that are standalone water recycling requirements that aren't also a WDR or an NPDES permit, those would have just a $16,000 annual fee if they're potable, or a $2,800 annual fee if they're non-potable. And then there's a third category, which is permits that are for the distribution or use of recycled water, but do not include production requirements. So don't include the treatment requirements for that water. And so this includes, there's a State Water Board General Order, the 2016-0068 General Order that has about 80 enrollees in it. So those permittees would fall under this category, and they would receive solely an annual fee of $1,500 per year. And so all of these These amounts are based on the annual workload that it takes to oversee and administer these permits for the regional water boards. And I think that basically covers it. But others, feel free to chime in if there's something I left out.
No, thank you, Laura. I think that's a good highlight. Again, we appreciate all the stakeholders' input and participation. I believe it's been 3 stakeholder meetings and to get to this, and we're referring to this as option F because we had other options, but that's led us to option F, and this is staff's proposal at this point that we're moving forward with. So are there any questions at this time or comments? Hey, good morning, Chuck. You have your hand up. I think you're first in the order here. Chuck, you might be on mute. There you go.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I joined. I had a little bit of computer problems this morning, so I may have to ask for a copy of your recording here so I can catch up a little bit. But I just have a quick question here. I don't think I represent Imperial Irrigation District. I don't think your agricultural uses of water are affected by this. Am I correct on that, or some way that we would be affected by either a potable or non-potable fee for recycled water production and for irrigated lands?
Yeah, so we would need to look at the specific permitting question. In almost all cases, you're right. This would be a fee that would be assessed on the wastewater facility that's producing the recycled water at
Right.
administering a recycled water program, not the end user. There's a handful of permits in that the lowest table there that have individual permits to use recycled water. So most of those examples are golf courses that have those individual permits, but that's about the only case where there's a user, such as an ag irrigation district, that has an individual permit. Most of the time, that permit is held by the wastewater facility. So the irrigation folks would not be receiving this fee.
I got it. That's what I suspected. Who would I talk to about getting access to the recording of this that I missed the first half an hour of?
So you could reach out to me, Chuck.
Okay. A day or two, or a week?
Usually,
or when do you...
just FYI, Chuck, it usually takes about a week though for IT to get everything posted. So you can reach out to me and then we can get you the recording.
Okay, I will do so. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Rosario. Ooh, it looks like Rosario clicked off. We'll go ahead and good morning, Debbie. We'll take you, Debbie. Good morning.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and thanks. I have a question, and then I can wait for a comment back. If you want to put me back in the queue too, that'd be great. Laura, you were saying that there might be a chance that you get 2 charges on top of each other. I thought it was going to be like if you had 2 different types of permit, you might get one and you might get a charge, and let's say that's your whether it's your WDR that takes care of your permit, and then if you have a recycling water permit, you might get a second one. Is that, am I hearing you correctly? Because I didn't understand that one.
Yeah. So the recycled water permitting landscape is highly diverse. There's a huge array of different combinations of permits that exist out there, and some of that is the history of the program and preference of different regional water boards over the years. So all of this is very generally speaking, and I'm happy to chat with you about specifics of specific facilities or projects. But yes, it is possible that there could be multiple permits for one single facility. They might have a permit that's their NPDES permit that includes the production requirements for recycled water. So that would be, they would pay their regular NPDES fee plus a $2,800 surcharge. And in some cases, they may have an additional permit for the distribution and use of the recycled water. So they might be enrolled under the general order as well. And in that case, they would also have an annual fee of $1,500 for that permit. And that's because, there is an ongoing workload for administering, all of those different permits, reviewing and doing inspections on all of those different permit types.
Okay, let me ask a clarification, because I know a lot of the, whether it's an NPDS or if you're coming under the general order now, is they really do want your treatment technology to be defined within your treatment plant permit. So would that be then the norm? Because some of them will say, hey, and your recycling is covered by this order, but your treatment is there. So would the norm be in those cases with this new part that it would be a kind of like a double?
Yeah, they would have a dual fee in that case. Yeah. It depends on the scenario. There's lots of different ways that it can go, but yeah, for that model of permitting, there would be the 2,800 as well as the 1,500.
Okay, I'll get back in the queue in my other part. So thank you. That answers it.
Laura,
you.
may I maybe add in? This is Annalisa Kihara with the Division of Water Quality. Debbie, to your question as well, we're having parallel discussions, and throughout this process where we've been working with all the stakeholders, we've also been communicating heavily with the regional boards. So I think this is kind of the initial kind of looking at how a fee can be applied, which again is going to be revisited annually when we go through the annual fee process. But also, I think our regional boards are also thinking about how to either reorganize and how they've historically permitted and how to maybe simplify the permits moving forward. So there could be a change in terms of permitting and permitting types moving forward as well.
Thank you. Rosario, good morning.
Good morning. I think Chuck and I must be sharing the same Wi-Fi situation. But anyway, Rosario Cortez, Water Reuse California. We feel that option F is really the best path forward. And we really appreciate State Board staff for your responsiveness in this process and for really working with us to find a reasonable path forward. So thank you for just kind of walking us through the nuances, and we'll continue to be listening, and we'll possibly just contact you one-on-one for any follow-up. So thank you again.
Thank you. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to make a comment. I really just wanted to kind of echo what Rosario just said. Thank you for all of the stakeholder engagement and the process. And I think we do feel that this option that you've kind of landed on is the most straightforward, although it's still complex, as the discussion has indicated. There's still some complexities. It is a lot simpler to understand than some of the prior, earlier ones that we were kind of struggling with. But it is partly just that reflection of the complex permitting landscape, as Laura put it. But in any case, I think we feel really comfortable with this as the approach going forward. So again, thanks for the engagement, and look forward to continuing that in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Debbie.
Sorry about that. And I don't know if I introduced myself the last time. I'm Debbie Mackey. I'm the executive officer of the Central Valley Clean Water Association. So anyways, on the different scenarios. First, I know with staff, a lot of the recycled water meetings were conflicts with their conference and CV salts and other critical areas in the Central Valley. But I do want to say, as we work through, option F for us is getting a lot closer to where we would look at. My concern would be, and this is kind of an option F maybe plus, is that we look a little bit at some tiering for some of these smaller communities, because I've got a couple, and by the way, I want to say a shout out to Rebecca Greenwood. I appreciate getting the matrix that you guys have been working on. But some of these really small communities that have, that are recycling, that are doing their best with doing it, it's like a 15% increase. It's not a non-substantial increase to their overall permitting cost. And I am saying overall permitting costs. I'm putting their NPDES, and then they have their recycled water permit. So now that was just thinking it was one charge, but if it ends up being two charges in there, we're looking at probably something that's closer to 30%. And so if there is a way with, that again, still trying to promote the use of recycled water, but if there is a way to provide some tiering, so that again, with that idea that, recycling is something that, the state has, and those that do this really have encouraged the use of is not to make that cost burdened on the smaller agencies. So is to spread it out a little bit more. So, but otherwise, I do want to say is, looking at the earlier options, I feel like this gets it a lot closer. So thanks.
Thanks for the input.
Mhm.
Thank you, Debbie. So I will pause here for a moment. Do not see any email questions at this time. Which lands us now into the open discussion of the agenda. I guess before we get into that, Bob, you have your hand up. Good morning.
Good morning. This was open discussion. Let me know if that's proper at this point, please.
Yes, but before we get started, Bob, I do want to share one document, and I'm going to ask staff if they can go ahead and put it up on the screen here. Give us a second here. Okay, thank you. And so you're looking at the fee stakeholder information website here. And as you scroll down, I'm going to have staff click on the link, which right there it says Waste Discharge Permit Fund Foundational Program Information. And so, again, I just wanted to highlight this, provide you an update. This goes back several years ago. We prepared this document, and we distribute it through the stakeholder process, but we now have posted it to our website. And so basically this is providing a summary of our foundational water board programs that are funded by the Waste Discharge Permit Fund. It basically summarizes each of the programs. We've worked with the Division of Water Quality to update this. As you go through it, scroll down, you'll see that basin planning is one of the programs, and there's a program description. There's also value of the program. There are specific links in there that are going to help provide more information. Total maximum daily load, the TMDL program is in there. Again, program descriptions, values, there's links. The enforcement program. There's the ocean beach monitoring program that's in there. And then we get into our two monitoring programs, the Gamma and the SWAMP, the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program. And then I wanted to highlight this here at the bottom here. Many times we're asked about the funding and the PYs associated with our foundational programs. And when you look at the top there, that basically breaks down each of what we refer to as our foundational programs, and these redirected costs that are put into each of our core fee programs. And so just kind of looking at it, like the Team DL and the Basing Planning Program. There are 77.1 PYs allocated, roughly 19.1 million in staffing. There's another 2.7 in contracts, totaling 21.8 million. And so the top column basically shows the breakdown of the allocated positions, and then the total funding of 47.3 million. And then I wanted to also highlight the middle column is basically other funding. So for example, like our most of this funding comes from the feds. So this is federal money that's supporting also the foundational programs. So there's roughly other funding sources, and the majority of that is federal funding of roughly 9.9 million. And so when you look at the bottom chart there, the fee payers and the fee paying programs are paying for 47 million. Federal funds are supporting roughly 10 million. And so when you look at the water board's total foundational programs, which include, of course, Team DL, basin planning and enforcement, the Gamma Swamp, and the beach monitoring, they're totaling $57 million. And then of that, the fee payers and the fee paying programs are roughly paying 47 million of that. And so again, I wanted to again highlight this document. It's now one of the resources that fee payers have an opportunity to go and take a look at. If you have any questions about our foundational programs, we plan on updating the numbers on an annual basis as we kind of go through the process. And then, of course, again, there's links in there that have updated information. And as the information gets updated annually, we'll go ahead and update those links also. And so back to open discussion. And Bob, you had your hand up.
Well, thanks for the Policy Wonks candy store. I can hardly wait to read it. I've skimmed through it already. One thing I do notice, and it's another level, but on an ongoing basis, it would be good to have a foundation for the foundational programs. That is to say, what was it a decade ago? So we can see the rate of growth, because as you pointed out in your document of July 2022, the increase with just cost of living for WDPF would have been from 76 million in 9-10 to 113 million in 21-22. But in actuality, it went to 184 million. So we have a program growth net of about 70 million, which is legislatively driven. It's certainly, you're just responding to it. But the point being, it would be helpful to have some sort of perspective within this rather than year to year. And that's all I've got to babble about. Thank you.
Okay. And we can, and I'll relook at those charts. I do know that we did break down all the programs, including the foundational programs in that chart that show the growth of those programs.
Yeah.
Again, we'll revisit it, and perhaps there's a better way of displaying it to make it a little more clear.
Okay, thanks.
Good morning, Chuck.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I again, my apologies for joining late, because I did want to raise the issue on the Gualala. You recall a month ago when we had the last meeting, there was that issue of these enforcement issues that have nothing to do with irrigated lands, but then irrigated lands are expected to contribute, I think, to these programmatic kind of enforcement issues. And I'm still struggling with the idea, is that fair? I mean, of all the different programs you guys administer, irrigated lands being my primary concern, how often are we dipping into the irrigated lands to help support enforcement actions that have nothing to do with irrigated lands? And, I had on to all of your enforcement kind of thing, but it's related to kind of these foundational programs we're just talking about. That are these really programs that would be it makes sense for irrigated lands to be paying into, or are these really never have anything to do with irrigated lands? For example, beach monitoring. There's funds for beach monitoring, but is that, I think, as I understand it, irrigated lands would pay for a small fraction of that cost of beach monitoring, but and so it's a very direct, specific question related to beach monitoring, but it has to do with the broader concerns. Is how reasonable and fair are these fees that are directed to things that have absolutely nothing to do with irrigated lands? I guess if you come back with the argument, well, irrigated lands could have enforcement conditions, and the people that are not dealing with irrigated lands would have to be on the tables would be turned, and they'd be helping to support the enforcement on that. But I just don't have a good sense of how irrigated lands are really associated with these other kinds of costs that are primarily, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, are directed to other water uses.
Well, I'll kind of start the response here. Then, if Phil or Ollie, so you want to chime in, kind of on the program side. One, I just want to remind that the foundational programs were originally supported by general fund, and that money was cut and supplanted with fee authority. So, of course, then we had to find a way of supporting these foundational costs, these foundational activities. With that said, many of our proposals, when they come in like this, for example, like this one is a TMDL, and the TMDL program is a foundational cost. And the method that's used is to spread that out to, all the fee programs, including irrigated lands. There's, again, I don't want to get into the studies, unless Phil wants to talk a little bit about this, but with beach monitoring, there's, impacts to, all programs related to the beaches and the contamination and the groundwater and so forth. Yeah, I mean, we do look at the cost of spreading this out. And I know when the proposals are written, we look at what specific programs. But again, in a situation like this, and in a situation like beach monitoring, when those come through, and we work with the legislators and the proposals, we look at the best way of funding the programs. And again, in a situation like the Guala River, this is related to the TMDL program, and the program is set up where all fee payers pay towards that. And so we are spreading that cost to all fee payers, and you're right, irrigated lands is going to take a portion of that. Phil, I don't know if you want to chime in and talk about, related workload or anything that is associated with that, or.
Yeah, Dave, first of all, just thanks. I agree with everything that you said. No corrections at all. I totally on the same page. Just in terms of adding a little bit of context to it, the TMDL programs are intertwined with our assessment programs and our monitoring programs and our planning programs. And those extend far beyond our compliance and enforcement groups. That's just foundational to the water boards. And so we have staff in many program areas that will be working with the data that's collected to determine whether or not the water body should be on the 303D list or should be removed from the 303D list. That's an ongoing workload. Our planners take all that information into consideration when they're developing amendments or new policies or plans. So the work really does span multiple programs, and the only way that we can fund it is to spread it out like that. And I'm more than happy to have a more detailed discussion, or even a sit down offline to share some information on that if you still have questions.
I may want to follow up on that. I mean, I don't want to get into a huge debate about relatively small amounts of money, but it's just I'm just having a hard time understanding from the irrigated lands perspective, to the extent that you're paying for these other costs and other programs. Does irrigated lands get any benefit from the funding portion that we put into it, or is it basically most of it goes to other things that have nothing to do with irrigated lands? And is that the right way to do it? And this is a larger, longer multi-year discussion. And I'm just, I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, if you came back and said, well, irrigated lands takes a much higher percentage of the costs than the amount they're actually contributing because the irrigated lands have these other issues. But I just can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any of those situations that would be where irrigated lands is getting a free ride or something like that because of the costs that are being supported by other aspects of the water quality program. So yeah, maybe Phil, is there any way to get a sense of where these funding, these programmatic based program funding are eventually go out to the individual types of water users, municipal versus agricultural versus other? I mean, is there a way to do that, or is that just asking too much detail that really isn't producible?
It's a fair question, and I'd be happy to respond to it. I do see that our board member Diadamo has a hand up, so I want to pause and hear her question.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that. It's not really a question, but just first of all, Chuck, thank you for raising the concern. I sort of track these meetings, you know, to look at overall fee increases, but then also because this issue has come up many times throughout the years. And I think, you know, I see Bob Gore, you know, is here. I don't see Emily Rooney or Roger Eisen, but there was, you know, a group, a sort of a spin-off group of ag stakeholders several years ago that really tried to drill down on these issues a little bit more. I think that, you know, your questions are good. This is something we should always be looking at. But, you know, my sense from the discussions in the past is that, you know, there probably are some of these programs that ag benefits more so than others. You know, we can always look at these issues more closely and try and do, you know, a better analysis. But I think the bigger issue is that, you know, we lost general fund support for these programs that benefit the entire state. And so general fund is really the more appropriate place to support these programs. But unless and until the legislature decides that, you know, they want to tap into general fund resources, you know, this seems to be a convenient place in the meantime. You know, I think that the funds or the program was changed up at a time, I think, when Bob Gore was working for the administration, right? And so you have more history than I do, Bob, but you know how it is. Once it's off the legislature's plate, it's really tough to get it back over there. And so I do know that David and John and a group of our folks, John Bishop, Karen Mogus, worked to assist this ag stakeholder group that had been formed to try and at least quantify what these programs, you know, the cost of these programs. It's not anything that we as board members or as staff are able to go and sort of lobby in your behalf. But I think that it was a helpful effort in that, you know, you were able to put together but the ag stakeholders were able to put together their assessment of, you know, what the cost burden is for these programs and, you know, make sure that from our staff's perspective, you know, those figures were approximately correct. And so I know that, you know, we did sort of help behind the scenes to facilitate those discussions. But, you know, unfortunately, that lobbying effort, you know, sort of got kicked off at a time where we weren't flush with money in the state. And so I think that's sort of where it ends, but keeping it on the back burner for when the state bounces back and there's, you know, extra money floating around. I think it's, you know, probably something that you all should continue to, you know, just be prepared in the event that another opportunity surfaces.
Right. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I guess I don't want to put too much emphasis on this, but I guess I just don't understand of all the different water quality or waste discharge permit funding programs, land disposal, water quality, NPDS permits, ag lands, cannabis, the foundational programs would potentially affect all of those areas, but is there any way to show the foundational funding that would be is it roughly in accordance with the the costs of those other types of specific programs. And I suppose ag lands could be hurt by, maybe there's a huge amount of foundational program that goes to support ag lands, but I just don't have that number off the top of my head. And I don't know if I'm putting too much emphasis on a too fine of a point, but how are the foundational funding sources fairly distributed to the various water quality programs? And I'm only assuming, probably because I just don't know, is that the irrigated lands probably don't get a whole lot of benefit off of these other types of foundational programs in comparison to the other programs. If I'm making any sense. And I'm not saying this whole current process for fees this year necessarily needs to do this, but it does seem to be a kind of a continuing concern about how all these foundational fundings they fairly distributed to the benefit of irrigated lands, for example. And a way to kind of look at that somewhere down the road, I think would be helpful. Enough said now. I'm not going to raise it again.
Thank you, Chuck. Bob, you had your hand up?
Yeah, to follow up on what the vice chair graciously said, Emily Rooney and I from the Ag Council in 2012, 13 asked for an accounting, and there was a vast one delivered. I will also add, in 2008, when I was working for Governor Schwarzenegger, there was some of you might recall, a recession when we were cutting budgets in half for all agencies. And all the general fund programs were moved to fee supported because there was less than no money. So that's the genesis of the shift, and it's been accelerated since then, though general fund is returned from very specific legislative authorizations. I will say the folks from IID should look at the letter that's been submitted to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee seeking a WDPF examination and determination where the funds go, which is specifically what they were requesting. I would also advise them to go to the CDFA website and look up the CROWE, CROWE consulting firm report. CDFA is attempting to align and reduce the costs of compliance. They are working with the State Water Board very closely. And then lastly, and linked to that, our friend Brianna St. Pierre at ILRP has a working group that's looking into how to realign the ILRP as a result of declining acreage, because the per acre fee is an unsustainable revenue source. So it might be a good time for IID to engage that. I would urge them to email Brianna St. Pierre and ask to be a part of that working group. The first meeting, if I recall correctly, is in early August. I think it's the 13th, not sure. But at any rate, there are various things to engage in aside from this session if you choose to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And yes, Bob, you're correct. That working group is scheduled right now for August 13th. And I do not see, just checking on email questions. Give me a moment here, waiting for a response. No questions at this time. Okay. And I don't see any questions here. And so moving into next steps, we are scheduled to take an item to the board at the September 18th board meeting for the board's consideration and adoption of fee schedules for fiscal year 24-25. Many of you have been through the process. We anticipate that The agenda or the items will be posted 10 days prior to this date, so roughly around September 8th, which kind of moves into a comment period. Staff, of course, at this point start to kind of, again, look at our options and, kind of go into a briefing period with our board members. And then, of course, roughly around the 8th, you'll see the agenda and the item posted. And again, there's an opportunity for a comment period at that point. And so at this point, again, one more time, I'm just checking on questions. I don't see anything. Again, I want to just thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it anytime that one of our board members is participating in our meetings. So we really appreciate that. I want to thank Phil and his staff for all their hard work on working with the fee side of the house on the proposals and the discussion. So thank you. I want to thank my staff for all their hard work on putting together the agenda and all the behind the scenes for the meeting run smoothly. And again, thank you for all the stakeholders who participated. We can't do it without your input and your questions. And so thank you. And so we'll be signing off and we'll be talking soon. And again, next time you probably hear from us will be at the board meeting in September. Thank you. So thank you for participating and everyone have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody.